So tonight's or this afternoon's program is Understanding and Responding to Dementia-Related Behaviors with Dr. Carol Stevens. We're delighted to co-sponsor this program with the Idaho Chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. This has been a 4-part series, and for those of you who are not aware, you can enjoy our programs in person, you can live stream them on our YouTube channel, and you can go to our website in the Library Programs tab, down to Program Archives, and watch a video recording of it, usually a couple days, maybe up to a week after the program itself, and you're welcome to share that link with anybody that would be interested. So Dr. Carol has worked as a psychologist for over 35 years. She is currently on a mission to increase community awareness about changes in thinking and memory in older adults, and the grave importance of early identification and intervention. Her goal is to assist older adults and their families to be intentional in planning for a future with quality of life until the end. In her psychology practice, she specializes in treatment of depression, anxiety, insomnia, and mental health issues in adults, seniors, and their families. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Carol Stevens.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to take a quick drink here. Well, I really appreciate people continuing to be interested in learning about Alzheimer's, and today we're going to talk about understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. And I decided that I want to start out today by talking about my own gene pool. I want to tell you a story about my dad in his later years when he was probably about 90 years old, and he had dementia. And he is a good example of dementia-related behavior, but it's kind of interesting because it's not horrific behavior. It's not really even, for most people, problematic behavior, but it was problematic. So I'm going to tell you this story. My father was on a stage, and he stepped out in front of a couple hundred people, and he raised his arms out, and he said, "Are you with me?" And the crowd roared, and they were with him. They said, "Oh, yay, we are with you, we are with you." Well, my dad never in a million years would have gotten on a stage and said, "Are you with me?" What my dad was talking about, he had gotten involved. My mother passed away, and I think my dad was lonely. He got involved with a group of people who met. He lived in a senior community. He got involved with a group of people who met every Friday night, and they had a drink, and they all could bring their own booze. They had a little cubby stash that they could keep. And somebody said to them, "This place is building a bar. They are no longer going to let us bring our own liquor. We're going to have to pay for drinks." And somehow this group got all worked up. My father was a retired surgeon, and he was pretty smart and pretty articulate. And they said, "We want you as our spokesperson. We're going to go and we're going to speak to this group. This whole group is being surveyed to decide whether or not we're going to have a bar in this facility." And my dad normally, if we had talked to my dad 10 years before, he would have said, that would be a great thing to have a bar. Family, friends, come and have a nice glass of wine at the bar, get a glass of wine and have it with your dinner. My dad would have loved it. But now my dad has dementia, and he's gotten roped into this group where they've decided that it is really a horrible thing that this facility is thinking about having a bar. I mean, they were mortified. So they spoon-fed my poor old dad all of this information that was fake news. And my dad got up in front of a couple hundred people, and he gave this talk. He presented all these facts, which were not facts, where they were fake facts. And then he jumped out and he said, "Are you with me?" And everybody was just crazy happy. They really thought he was right on target, and that this bar was a terrible idea. They were going to be cheating people of their rights, and they were going to be making money off of them. So that was the end of that. I didn't know a thing about it. I got a call from the administrator a week later. He says, Carol, did you know your dad was up on stage, kind of convincing people? He said, we had a survey and people said they don't want to have a bar. And he said, we've just built a new restaurant and a new bar, and your dad. I said, I'm really sorry, but I said, my dad would never have done that in the past. Anyways, 5 years later, I am at a conference and I'm sitting next to a woman who happens to work at that facility. My dad is long gone, he died. And I said to the woman, oh, my parents were there. And I was kind of happy that she might know my dad and my mom. She said, oh, you're Bill Stevens' daughter? And I said, yes, that's my dad. And she said, we still don't have a liquor license. So I tell you this story because my dad would never have done that. And this was dementia-related behavior. He was confused. He was taking too many pain medicines. My mother had died. He got involved with sort of a new group. There were people that he normally hadn't been involved with. And I think he felt really kind of important that all these people wanted him to get up and be the spokesperson for their cause. Anyways, behavior has ramifications. And in retrospect, I said to that woman 5 years later, I said, I'd be happy to get my sisters together and send letters. I think that they had to get approval from the county or from the area that they lived in to get a license, and they couldn't get a license because the people said they didn't want it. And so I said, I'll get my family to write letters and, say my dad was demented. He didn't know what he was talking about. In fact, he didn't really believe what he was saying. But, at that point, she was kind of like, get out of here. This is a non-issue. But I felt bad about it, and I felt bad because I thought I should have been paying attention to what was going on with my dad, that he was kind of getting involved in this stuff that wasn't really helpful. And when I think about dementia-related behaviors, I would say that the behaviors that I'm most concerned about are behaviors that would be completely incongruent with people's sense of self and who they want to be in the world. And that it is our responsibility as caretakers, providers, caretakers, family members, to kind of make sure that we help them be who we know they want to be. Don't you, when you think about the people in your life, don't you know kind of morally, ethically, behavior-wise, kind of who they are and how they want to be in the world? And I feel like I should have done a better job, saying to my dad, Dad, you don't believe that stuff. Let's do something else. So I brought this because my dad was a sailor when he was a young man, and it was what gave him the most joy in his life was telling sailing stories as he got towards the end of his life. And it just makes me think, I should have gone to see my dad and I would put this on the dining room table, and I would say, Dad, tell me sailing stories. Tell me about this particular regatta, which I'm not sure what the year on here is, but it's really old. And he loved to tell me those stories. And it made him happy, and it was who he is. So dementia-related behaviors are really about doing things that are incongruent with who you are and how you want to be in the world. So welcome to the third talk in the series. We've talked about the 10 warning signs of dementia. I've got flyers over there, and you are free to watch the past videos that are in the library archives. We talked about the 10 warning signs, the primary changes in memory, thinking, and management of day-to-day behaviors. We also talked about the progressive nature of dementia, frequently spanning 8 to maybe 15 years, and management strategies, including medical treatment, that can help somewhat with cognitive symptoms. But at present, there is no evidence-based study that would really find a treatment that is going to cure the disease. So we're still hoping, we're still wishing. The Alzheimer's Association does a ton of research, and I'm optimistic that if they found such an effective treatment for COVID, I think they're going to find an effective treatment for Alzheimer's. But the best treatment at present involves early intervention, early identification, and changes thinking and memory. We talked about this last time. I think, were you all here before? Okay, well, hopefully on live stream there are new people who are going to learn new things. So a referral to a primary doctor or even neurology or both to evaluate the brain and to treat things that may be affecting thinking. There are a lot of things that can impact people's thinking that are not Alzheimer's. And people say, well, you know, I don't really want to know what it is, and what's the point of going if I can't have treatment? But the point of going to the doctor is that there are things that are treatable. Depression sometimes seems like dementia. Delirium from medications and infections and biological processes frequently looks like dementia. So if you're starting to have any symptoms, you really want to see a doctor and have those things treated that can be treated. And then get on with building a team for yourself if you are diagnosed, building a team and putting together a plan to put together a future that you want for yourself. The younger you are at the time you go see the doctor and you have this early intervention, the more able you are to make plans for what you want to do with your life. Unfortunately, a lot of people wait for a crisis. They say, it's not time, I'm too early, you know, let's wait until they get worse. But really, early intervention is the treatment of choice now so that people can decide how they want to live their life and start to make some plans. Start to decide where they want to live, what they want to do. Make sure that people know, this is the person who I am, and these are the things that I want to do. You know, I knew that my dad wanted to talk about sailing. If I had not been where he was, I would have gone and educated the people around him and said, if you want to make my dad happy, talk to him about sailing. He'll tell you the story 10,000 times, and the 10,000th time, he will be as happy as the first. So it gave him infinite joy. So today our focus is going to be on understanding and responding to dementia-related behaviors. As dementia progresses into the middle stages of the disease, the brain's capacity to process information becomes increasingly clogged up. There isn't much connectivity. The brain that normally functions in retrieving memories, identifying problems, coming up with plans for problem solving, all start to diminish severely in the middle stages of dementia. And along with that is that people no longer are able to read their body and their mind and their emotions. So when I say to you right now, I want you to just think about like how your body feels. Are there any places in your body where you're a little uncomfortable, you have a little pain, you have a little twinge of discomfort, or maybe more? And how do you feel emotionally? Like, are you comfortable? Are you interested? Are you thinking about lunch? I mean, I want you to just pay attention to how good your brain is at reading everything that's going on in you. And as people get dementia, the brain gets worse and worse at reading and interpreting our internal signals. So when people get cold, they don't know they're cold. When people are hungry, they don't know they're hungry. When people are in pain, frequently they don't know they're in pain. I saw a woman a while ago who had had hip surgery, and she was getting up and walking on her hip like the day after her surgery. And you know, this was something that needed not to be done, but she didn't interpret what was going on. You know, there probably was pain, but it wasn't translating in her brain. So the executive skills of the brain, when you think about our brain, it's like an executive of a big corporation. The frontal lobes of our brain read the world. They see what's going on. Our eyes bring in visions. Our ears bring in information. Taste buds bring in information. Our body and our skin tells us, kind of, is it cold? How does it feel in the world? We move, and there's all kinds of information that comes into our body with moving through space. And the executive skills in the front take all that information and keep us ticking and running and going forward every day. The brain tells me, like right now, I'm moving like this. The brain is saying, you want to kind of wiggle up there. So I'm wiggling. Now I'm going to say, stop wiggling. Look, that is the frontal lobe of the brain. It is managing me. It's managing me in space in the world. And as time goes on, the executive skills start to deteriorate, and the part of the brain that manages the self starts to be overtaken by the limbic system, which is the emotional self. It's our most primitive self that really reacts to danger and safety in the world. And that becomes a primary driver of people's decision making. The brain that is thinking and planning and reading and organizing defers to the emotional self. So as time goes on and dementia gets worse, people's decision making becomes more and more based on emotion, impulse, and just reactivity. And it's not a conscious choice anymore. So behavior problems, is what we're going to talk about today, become a way that people communicate their internal experiences. Does that make sense to people? When you see a behavior, when you see someone acting out, when you see someone anxious and agitated or suspicious and fearful, or I've seen a lot of patients who wander, they just walk back and forth, they pace. They just pace and they pace and they pace. And that behavior is the body's attempt to calm the self down. Think about if you just sat 24 hours a day and did nothing. Personally, I would utterly die of boredom in about 10 minutes, maybe even 5. But the behaviors become a way of trying to communicate that there's something wrong. So let's just think about you and your executive functioning and the last big thing that happened in your life. Think about something that happened that was upsetting, that you thought, oh, this is really bad. I hate it when this happens. And think about how you reacted. How did you feel? How did anybody feel when you had that last big experience? Anybody?
Well, it was about my dog.
It was about
It was about my dog having health problems, and I was very concerned and worried about her. What I did was get an appointment with the vet, and we got some medication for her.
Uh-huh. But you were upset.
I was very concerned.
Crying or?
I didn't cry on that occasion.
Okay.
No.
Dogs make people cry.
I know.
How about anybody else? Can you think about a time recently when something happened when you really were aware that you responded in your very human way?
I was thinking that, I guess, feeling like I was going to do something that was really stupid. And so I tried to think about things that I could do to keep myself doing something that was more helpful, So I was thinking about, okay, what can I do now, I should be thinking about some other things because this is crazy,
Okay, but that's a beautiful example of you really following your thoughts. You were really plugged into what you were thinking. You were
feeling.
Self-monitoring. Yeah, you were feeling really icky.
Like I was going to do something really crazy.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
scream at a bird, or something like that.
Scream at a bird.
Yeah, because the bird was after me because it was protecting its nest.
Oh.
And it was making terrible sounds,
But this is a beautiful example of how active our brains are. These things go on in a world, and your emotions, your amygdala, your animal self, is reacting and having all these feelings, and then it sends a message up to your frontal lobes, and it says, man, this bird thing is really getting on my nerves. And your frontal lobe says, okay, well, what can you do? You could do this, you could do this, you could do this. You explored the options. You said, I'm like kind of embarrassed because I'm acting dopey, like maybe I'm gonna rein myself in. So, these frontal lobes, they self-monitor and they self-regulate. I mean, I think it's amazing that our brains, like every second of every day, are kind of reading the world, directing us kind of how to go forward. But that's what goes with Alzheimer's, is that ability to self-regulate, to self-monitor, and to make decisions based on the information coming from your body. So let's talk about the information coming from the body. And I'm calling them triggers to challenging behaviors. And when people have dementia, if they have behavioral issues, there is a layer underneath that we don't see. And that layer underneath is all that stuff that's going on internally. Starting with pain. A lot of people with cognitive disorders have significant medical issues, and they have pain. They have discomfort. They might have discomfort because it's too cold. They might have discomfort because it's too hot. They may have discomfort because their shoes don't fit, or because somebody forgot to put their dentures in. A trigger can be fatigue, or hunger, or thirst. How about constipation for a good one? Or a full bladder, having to urinate. Maybe wet pants. Overstimulation, being in a place. I just was at a restaurant a couple nights ago that was so loud. And I loved the food and I loved being there, but it was so loud I couldn't hear anything that any of my table mates were talking about. And I was so overstimulated. I left and my shoulders are just up to here. I was just full of anxiety and agitation. Behavioral symptoms that this is not dementia-related behavior. This is like a normal person-related behavior. I was upset with all that overstimulation. And then there's boredom, there's sadness, there's irritation, there's isolation. There's unfamiliarity with surroundings. There's confusion. There's feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of life and tasks. I think probably all of us at this stage of life, there are times when I pick up a phone and I'm like, oh my God, like I don't know how to do such and such with my phone. I want to forward something to somebody and I think, geez, I need a 30-year-old like sitting right next to me to do this task. But all of those things, all of those human triggers fuel behavioral problems. And when you have someone who's not able to identify that they're having all those triggers, think about what it was like, what would be like if you didn't know that you had the pain. Think of what it would be like if you didn't know that you were upset about the birds. You knew you could put a name on it. You could problem solve it. You could work it out for yourself. But the problem with people with dementia is that they can't put a name on it. They can't identify any of these things that are invisible to the outside world. I don't know if you have pain. I don't know if you're sad. I don't know, I am not able to read you. But the point of this talk today is to say we need to learn a new language when we work with people with dementia, because there's a level of people's being that's invisible and is unidentifiable to them, but somebody needs to identify it. I don't usually like to compare older people to babies, but we do it with babies. A baby cries and we look really hard at what's wrong. Usually there aren't that many things, but sometimes if it's not, hunger, I don't know, what are baby things? But babies have things. I mean, how does a baby tell you they're cold? Now and then I see people who have their babies out in the winter and they have almost nothing on them, and I think, wow, you know, that baby's not going to say, you know, give me another sweater. It's cold out here. And people with dementia have that same inability to self-monitor and self-regulate and then problem solve. So those problems that are being experienced just end up being kind of an inner turmoil, an inner upset, and oftentimes they morph into dementia-related behaviors. People start to wander, they start to get anxious, they start to get agitated, they start to... I wanted to ask all of you, are there things that you've seen in people you know? Have you all known people with dementia? Are there behaviors that you have seen that you think, you know, this person, like, it kind of seems like they're trying to tell me something? Because these behavioral problems really are a form of communication. They are a nonverbal form of communication that something somewhere is amiss. But it's deep, it's mysterious. You gotta be a searcher, you gotta be a detective in a way, and to try to decode those behaviors to figure out, what are those behaviors telling me? And it's very easy to get sucked into thinking that the behavior is the problem. The wandering, the pacing, the agitation. Thinking, well, I'm just gonna get that person to sit down. In the old days, they put restraints on people. They sat them down. They held them down. They tied them in their bed. I worked as a nursing assistant when I was in high school. We had these things that we tied on the bed springs to keep people in their beds. And what were they doing? They were keeping people from expressing, I think, some kind of feeling, communicating some kind of feeling with being up and wandering around. They did not want that to happen. Does this make sense to people? Are you hearing what I'm saying? I think it's so interesting to me when I think about the things that we focus on, and I think, you know, this is probably appropriate for teenagers as well. I mean, a lot of teenagers they're not masterful with self-regulation and self-monitoring. They don't really know what they're feeling. They're feeling a lot, but they don't know what it is. And so that kind of behavioral stuff becomes a way of expressing some of those internal feelings. And it's easy to get hooked into, whoa, that is bad behavior. But the question is, what's under that bad behavior? Because there's a human being that has all those possible triggers, and I think probably I listed only, you know, a tiny portion of the things that could be troubling to people. I mean, if you followed yourself around all day long and you tried to read your internal experience, you would have lots of experiences of things that aren't going quite right, that you're a little uncomfortable, that you got to wiggle around, you got to move around, you got to warm up, you got to take a nap. The world is full of triggers for behavioral problems. So one of the things that I see in people that I work with, and especially in couples that I work with, is that oftentimes there's a long, slow, progressive decline of these changes in people's ability to self-monitor and self-regulate. It doesn't happen just overnight, that it is a slow change. And oftentimes people see their partners as getting lazy or slothful or passive aggressive, because people's brains are no longer saying to them, you know what, normally you pick up your dishes and you put them away. The brain has lost this information. And so people are not doing the things they normally do. I recently talked to someone who said her husband sleeps in a separate room and he hasn't allowed anybody to change his sheets for like almost a year. And now why wouldn't you change your sheets? You know, this is not passive aggressive behavior. This is not, my wife is ticking me off, I'm just not gonna clean my room. This is that there's something going on, and that behavior just becomes a way of expressing that there's something going on underneath. So the people who are having those kind of interactions end up angry, irritable, cranky. Actually, I did a talk at the library, at the Kitchen Library a while ago, and 2 women came up to me and they said, you have to do a talk about caregivers because caregivers are so mad. And I thought, well, this is interesting, that this is kind of, they really want to be validated. Their experience, they're with someone now who's not the way they were in the past. But they're not the way they were because their brain isn't functioning. And I think this is one of the things that people don't know, like these deep pieces of the brain is not functioning, but the brain is not functioning because the body is suffering. There's something going on under here. Feelings are not being experienced or validated. So that getting mad certainly doesn't help, and getting into a power struggle and thinking that I'm going to be rational and reasonable with you and convince you that you have to be different or be the person that you once were, that never works. So part of the challenge in responding to dementia-related behaviors is to be able to take a step back and to say, I'm the one in control here. I'm the one that can manage myself. I'm the one that can self-regulate. And now I have to do it. Because if you want to make a person with dementia worse, you give them nonverbal body language and tone signals. It isn't even words. Sometimes the words really are not getting through to people. They're not really understanding what you're saying. You're over here trying to reason and explain to people why they need to clean their room and do the stuff you think they need to do, take care of their finances. That doesn't help to reason. What helps is to pay attention to your tone and to really say, somehow I have to come from my heart. I have to come from the part of me that does love this person. A lot of times people say to me, I don't love my partner anymore. I can't stand them because they're so impossible. And they think that that person is misbehaving intentionally. And if there's one thing I would say that you have to work really hard at getting rid of is this thinking that demented people are doing this on purpose. I used to work in nursing homes, and now and then people would smear poop all over their bathrooms. And the staff would say, can you believe they would do that? They really must hate us. And I'd say, no, you know what? There is not a human being on earth who would smear poop around their bathroom to get back at somebody. This is an expression that there's something going on with this person, and they're not able to self-regulate, self-monitor, and make good decisions. So there's a lot of learning that needs to be done about this. So if you find yourself wanting to straighten people out, like get people to change for you, like really back off and realize that our job is to step into their world, to figure out who they are, what they're feeling, what their experience in the world is. And sometimes you'll never know what's going on, but sometimes you do find out. If you know somebody well, you know kind of where their pain is in their body. You know that they've had accidents and they have a sore hip that usually is a sore hip if they do certain stuff. So I think part of it is just being aware and thinking about who the person is that you're with. But in terms of the navigating the triggers and detecting what's wrong, is the first thing to do is really notice people's physical needs. Like notice the pain, notice, have they had something to drink? Have they had food? A lot of people wear glasses and they don't do well in the world without their glasses. A person with dementia is going to get up and they're not necessarily going to put their glasses on. So you want to say to yourself, what do I know about this person? And what do I need to do to make sure that physically they're taken care of? Because a lot of times people with dementia, especially here, there are like a lot of people who are really intelligent and they still come off as really intelligent. But underneath that intelligence, there is this dementia where people are not connected to themselves and their ability to run their life. So paying attention to are they wearing clothes that fits them? Do they have clothes? You know how it is when you wear a pair of pants that's too tight and your pants are tight all day long and you're just uncomfortable. You're aware of it all day long. Someone with dementia would be uncomfortable with it, but they wouldn't think, I'm going to go change my pants and put on a stretchy waist. But just paying attention to, like, you know, kind of what appears to be troubling to people. So paying attention to people's thinking, people's level of agitation. Are people able to focus their thinking at all? A lot of people develop delirium from medications, from infections. It really is, I mean, I think of it as kind of pollutants in the brain that is making people's thinking really out of whack. And it takes away people's ability to focus and concentrate and attend to things. So usually when that's going on, people are not really able to complete a full sentence. They'll start something and you'll look at their face and you'll think, well, they're gonna tell me something. And then the words just, have you seen that in people with delirium? Oftentimes people who have had anesthesia. Anesthesia is a typical thing that really affects people's thinking and ability to focus and concentrate. So watching people's thinking and noticing if their thinking really is falling off the track, if they're hearing things, if they see things, these are all indicators that there's something medical going on and that the person needs to be seen by the doctor. And then there are environmental issues. The light, like sound. I just saw someone recently who lived in a senior care center and she loved music. She loved Frankie Valli. And she loved the Frankie Valli TV station, you know, those stations that have songs and they have people dancing. And I'd come to see her and we would sing and dance to Frankie Valli. And somehow I remembered all those songs, you know, you surprise yourself. But one day I went in and she was very agitated, very uncomfortable. And I looked at the TV and one of the cable news stations was on and it was showing the riots. It was during the George Floyd time. And somebody had come into her room and changed her TV station. And this woman was a different person. And she was kind of talking about feeling scared and feeling scared of things. And she had no cognizance that that stuff that was going on the TV was impacting her on such a deep level. And so just noticing all those kinds of things, the environment in which people are living can definitely impact people's internal life. Then we have people's emotional needs. After you pay attention to all those physical needs, trying to figure out, like, what's going on with this person? How, you know, why are they upset, and why are their dementia-related behaviors going on? But look at their emotional needs. Explore people's feelings. You can ask people what they feel. I saw a guy recently who was in a nursing home and he was in a wheelchair and he's very angry and aggressive. And he would just take his wheelchair around and, you know, they were kind of thinking that he couldn't live there anymore because he was so aggressive with people and they were afraid he was going to hit people in his wheelchair. And he just seemed upset and, you know, ready to, his face was red, he was just mad all the time. And so they did a medical workup and they didn't really find anything. And somebody said, you know, we have this incredible baby doll that looks like a real baby. And we're going to give him the baby doll and see how it is for him to have this baby doll. And then there was a big discussion of people saying there is no dignity to that. You cannot give an old guy in a wheelchair a baby doll. Well, we gave this guy the baby doll, and I have never seen a more tender, loving person with a baby in my life. The guy had the baby doll with him all the time. It looked real. And he loved that baby. And he would pick the baby up and he would talk to the baby. It calmed him down. His entire being was different because all of a sudden he had love in his life. And it came from the baby doll. You know, we were talking about dogs, taking dogs to see veterans. It's the same thing. You know, it's kind of recognizing that there are all these internal needs that are just sitting there waiting, and some of them are fired up, some of them need to be met, some of them are adequately met, but it's important to explore what needs does this person have that are not being met, because they are not meeting their needs anymore. So, anxiety, agitation, confusion, suspicion or paranoia are very common in the middle stages of dementia. People lose things and they can't figure out in their mind, where is that thing? Who took it? Where is it? I mean, a lot of times people think it's been stolen. And so there's this paranoia that goes on. And it doesn't go away. People don't calm down. Oftentimes families and staff will try desperately to convince people that what they're thinking and believing is not real. But a delusion is as real as this piece of paper. You will never convince me I am not holding a piece of paper. And with delusions where people believe false things related to their dementia, those things are real for them. People spend a lot of time trying to convince people, talking to them, yelling at them, reasoning with them. And with people who are believing false things, it is much more effective to say, you know, what does this person love to do? I mean, this, like a lot of people love music. Put together a playlist and put headphones and music on for somebody who thinks that, you know, there's someone around the corner who stole their purse. And distract them. Distraction, or the term redirection, is used a lot in senior care. That if people are focused on things that are causing them severe angst, the worst thing to do is to try to convince them that it's not real, because you're just going to get them to dig in. And it is real to them. I mean, what's important is to step in and be with that person in their reality, and to know that you're not going to change their reality, but you can change their experience. You can change how they feel. And if they're doing something that feels good, if they're baking cookies with you, or folding warm towels with you, or going out and looking at the garden with you, those feelings are going to shift and be altered and move people in a way better direction. Well, so I want to tell you another story. I got time for another story, and the story is about a guy named Harry. And Harry had been a lineman for the phone company, and Harry wore those hats that they wore in the Grumpy Old Men movies. Did you see those Grumpy Old Men movies? The Midwestern hats with visors and the ear flaps and the fur inside. Well, Harry would wear 2 or 3 of them at a time. And I think he was a lineman, and I think he felt like those were protecting him and keeping his head safe, like probably a helmet that he wore probably every day in his working life. So he'd always have these hats on, and he wore his flannel, his wool flannel shirts. And so I was asked to see him, and I was asked to see him because people said that Harry was an escape artist. He was on a memory care unit, and he kept trying to run away. And so Harry would get up in the morning, and he'd go down the hall, and he'd sort of sneak by doors, and he'd kind of check the doors. Then he'd move, and he'd check another door, and then he'd go back and check again. And some doors would open, and they'd be people's rooms, you know, and they'd tell him to get lost. But the locked doors to the facility, he couldn't get out of. And so he would go, and sometimes he would get really worked up, and he would start banging on the doors and get kind of aggressive. Or another strategy was that he would keep his eyes open for visitors. He was always standing by the nurse's station watching to see if there were visitors that he could, you know, just kind of snuggle up and sneak out right behind them. He was a sweet old guy. Anyways, they wanted me to see him because they said, you know, this is terrible, this is dangerous, he's going to escape, and you know, we're going to get in trouble, and so we want you to see him and maybe suggest that they put him on some kind of sedatives to calm him down because he's worked up. And I thought, you know, that does not seem like the right solution to the problem. And so I went and I tried to talk to him, and he really was not amenable to conversation. He was not able to express himself at all. But he started to cry. When I paid attention to him and just looked him in the face, he started to sob and weep and weep. And I said, does he cry like this? And he said, yeah, you know, when people pay attention to him, he cries. And I said, what do we know about this guy? I mean, we know he was a lineman, but what else do we know about him? Well, we don't know much. And so I looked in the chart, and there was somebody who had kind of volunteered to be his power of attorney, but she wasn't terribly connected to him. But I called her up and I said, tell me about Harry. I am seeing him and I'm concerned about, he seemed like he's having a hard time. And she said, oh, well, he is. She said, he used to go out with my mother, and she lived just down the block. They were in a relationship for years and years and years. And they never got married, they never lived together, but they were very, very close companions. And she said, my mother's in the nursing home down on the 2nd floor. And I just nearly fell over. And I said, I can't believe that these people don't know this. Well, somehow, I mean, I don't know if Harry knew that she was downstairs, but Harry knew that she was out in the world, and he was trying to find her. And he was sobbing because he couldn't find her. And even when I tell this story, it always gets me because it just seems so wrong. So anyways, I said to the staff, let's get him dolled up and let's take him downstairs to see her. And the person said, she has terrible cancer, she's very jaundiced, she's not gonna live very long. I said, he's gotta see her. So I took him down, and he walked in, and he was like a different person. He was bright, clear. He walked over to her, they held hands, they kissed. He looked at her and he said, she was yellow as yellow could be. He said, you are so beautiful. And they held hands and they just, coo-cooed with each other for about 5 minutes. And then she said, okay, well, it's time for you to go. And he said, okay. And he came over to me and took my hand and we left. We went upstairs and I had the staff bring him down, a couple times a day for the next couple weeks. And then she passed away. And I said to the staff, he needs to go to the funeral. And they're like, oh, well, he's a wanderer, he's gonna run away. I said, no, he has to go to her service. So he went to the service and we got 3 or 4 copies of the flyer with her lovely picture and the words. And we had the staff look at the flyer and talk to him about her. And he wasn't responding or able to articulate it much of anything. But he was there and he knew that he was connected to this person who was so important in his life. And after that, he settled down and he settled in and he was way better. Anyways, it's a story that just kills me every time I think about it because yeah, it's hard. But the important thing is we need to be aware that people have an internal life and people have another life, and just because they can't express it doesn't mean it's not there. So our job when we are with people with dementia is to go the step further to find out how they're doing. Are they okay? Are there triggers going on that are causing them discomfort in their life? So that is your job for today, is to take that and be aware that there is a whole person wherever you go. They're there. So, thank you. So are there any questions? I'll repeat the question too. Anything that you want me to clarify?
I'm wondering how you would recommend us to become more aware of things like that. I mean, we almost need to be more of someone who looks for more information and try to get some feedback, especially if we don't know the person too well, but as a friend, how can we make these wonderful connections that you have made, with these people who are not able to speak, but who have needs
Yeah.
that can be met if we can only figure it out.
It is a matter of figuring it out. It's really. I think part of what's important as we all are continuing to age is to clarify to people who we are ahead of time. I put together a form called Embrace What Matters. And actually, I'll bring it next time. And it's a form just where you write down, it's not your living will where you write down how you want to die. It's not your will where you write what you want done with your money and your stuff. It's who you are and who you want to continue to be. And so what's most important to you in life? What do you love, and when do you want to make sure that no matter what happens to you in your life, you want to make sure that that is there. And I think some of you were here last time, and I told the story about the woman who had been in the orchestra, and nobody knew that she had been a musician all her life. And we want people to know who we are. And if you know who someone is, like me with talking to my dad about his sailing, I don't need to know a lot about his sailing. I don't need to know the statistics or what kind of boat he raced. I just need to know that he loved sailing. And so when I step into his life and I want to engage him in a positive way and I want him to feel good, I bring up what he loves. And so I think it's really helpful for people to write down who you are and what you love, like what matters most to you in life. So that because you can have those things. That guy could have had more contact with the woman that he loved if somebody had made an effort to make that happen. So write your story, write the what matters to me story, what I love. Maybe you love your faith, maybe you love your music, maybe you love a teapot that your auntie gave you. Maybe you love petting a kitty. What do you love? What are things that when you think about like not being able to run your life, what are things that you want for people to put in your life so that you have those still? Because you're still you. You're still going to be you. And you're still going to derive great pleasure from that. Do you have a question?
Sorry that I didn't one and two, and so I got to 3, and I need to again, and I'll find out about part 4.
Well, we'll be here on July 11th. We're going to talk about effective communication strategies. So somebody asked at the beginning, how do you say to somebody you're concerned? So we're going to talk about how do you step in and say you're concerned. Part of this is having courage. Part of it is getting rid of this stigma and this mentality that talking about dementia is really going to hurt people's feelings. What hurts people's feelings is not getting the help they need. And this is my whole mission. I'm not in love with coming up here and doing these talks, but I really want people to think about how are we going to help these people who are starting to get dementia, who don't know they have dementia. They are not able to understand what's going on. They don't see that they're worse. You talk to most people who are living with a person with dementia, and most people, at a certain point, people don't recognize that they're having decline. And in some ways, it saves them from the emotional pain of knowing that you're having trouble. But then they're not able to compensate in their lives. So people's lives don't do well unless somebody steps in and really helps out and says, I know who this person is. I know how this person would want to live. Maybe this person, I know that this person maybe would love to live in a care center because they are very social and they would enjoy themselves living there. And somebody else would say, oh no, they have a beautiful house. Keep them in their house out there in, star weather or whatever. But knowing who you are makes a huge difference. And if you have a power of attorney, the power of attorney needs to know really fully who you are and how you want to live. So write a little story about how I want to live until the end. We make a big deal out of how we want to die, but I am a big fan of, if we're going to live 8 or 10 or 15 years with cognitive problems, we might as well think about how we want to live during that time so that it can be quality. People can have a quality of life. Other questions? Comments?
children, the children are, their frontal lobe is starting to make connections and,
Yes.
and do the management. Then we reach this wonderful stage where we're kind of in charge of ourselves and we keep going. And then, depending on genetics or whatever and our accidents, the brain may be affected, dementia starts, and the brain loses its ability to, with all those things that we learn.
Yeah.
And so we have to go back to what we were doing, except with that other lens.
It is. It's an interesting arc. But the thing that we know when we're older is we know who we were. You know, I mean, we have been someone. And each person in here has an incredible richness of who you are and what's important to you and what matters, what your politics are, or your lack of politics is. And I mean, each of us has a very rich self that we've been creating all these years. And figuring out how you can get people to help you maintain that is critical. And it's not rocket science. I mean, my dad, I talked to him about sailing, and I talked about sailing every time I saw him. It wasn't that I had to come up. I mean, at first when he got dementia, I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna have to go take him to the jazz concerts and take him here and do this and do that. He didn't want to do any of that stuff. He was perfectly happy to talk about sailing 10,000 times. So the people around you, they don't have to, you know, bend over backwards to make your life fascinating or to give you rich things. My dad had a hamburger and lemonade, a cheeseburger and lemonade every single night for like the last 5 years of his life. One of my sisters came from New York and Dad has to eat salad. I said, you know what, Dad doesn't want to eat salad, and personally, I don't care. And he was happy. Every cheeseburger and lemonade made him happy. So, you know, think about what makes you happy and think about what you want to have in your life in the future, because you've spent your whole life being intentional and having what you want. And there's no reason why you can't make some plans so you have more of what you want until the end. Okay, well, thank you all. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you, tell you stories.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Carroll. It was another wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So thanks, everybody, for joining us today.